the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Tonight, let's kick things off with the Alabama Crimson Tide here. Your main character for the 2024 football season for Alabama will be who?
Well, it's obviously easy to pick the quarterback, Jalen Milroe, but I'm going to go a different route. And I'm going to go with who we think is going to be the starting running back, former 5-star Justice Haynes. I think he's going to be the ultimate X factor in this Alabama offense this year, because as great as the quarterback play has been in recent years for Alabama, they've gotten away from having that dominant running game. And I think with Jalen Milroe's limitations as a vertical passer, like, I think if they start just getting in the option game and just, become just a dangerous running game, because that's the biggest thing with Jalen Milroe. You look at how, like, kind of the guys he's compared to just athletically, like the Lamar Jacksons of the world. Like, Lamar Jackson was running for like 1,600 yards. Like, Cam Newton ran for like 1,400 yards. Like, these guys were elite, had elite rushing production. So Milroe, as dynamic of an athlete as he was, what do you have, like 400 yards, like 500 yards rushing a year ago? Like, it was not the most rushing production. So their running production was not good, even though they had a running quarterback. So I think if you have that true dynamic home run hitter in the backfield, I think it just opens up things for Jalen Milroe and this passing game. And this Alabama offense is going to be that much more difficult to stop. So Justice Haynes, I think they got to have that game breaker in the run game.
I think they have Jam Miller too. It's a great running back name. Jam Miller is just, he's going to be good at Alabama. Like,
and
Jam
the other
Miller?
5-star, Richard Young, I know was a 5-star at some point too. So I mean, that backfield should be loaded. But
well,
Jace
that's what's interesting, because
a guy, he wasn't anything like special, like what Alabama's had. Like, he wasn't nearly on like Jahmyr Gibbs's level, like a true like home run hitter.
What would you guess Washington's rushing offense was last year, ranked in the country?
Oh man, I know that dude. I'm blanking on his name. Last year, he was a workhorse.
The Mississippi State transfer.
Yeah, well, in the country, I don't know, probably top 40, top 30,
106th.
Oh man, way off. Samsonite.
Year prior for Kalen DeBoer at Washington, 69th. They haven't really prioritized running the football up there in Seattle. So I'm curious, because the identity with Alabama, I mean, it obviously changed a little bit with Bill O'Brien and the Bryce Youngs of the world. And then part of it was just like you had elite wide receiver play, right? Like, I think that's what's so interesting about the Bama conversation, where you talk about, like, they have these blue chippers at running back, and that's just traditionally what they've been so good, and what they've been, that dynasty was built around the early 2010s. What I think is so interesting is how much Kalen DeBoer evolves, right? Like, you kept the same RB coach when you came in, Gillespie, so he's still there. You bring in Nick Sheridan. Ryan Grubb doesn't come down with you as OC. He's now the OC of the Seahawks. I'm curious how much of this all looks different than what we saw in Washington. Does he have Jalen Milroe throw as much and sit in the pocket like he did with Penix? The problem is you had 3 NFL wide receivers at UW. Bama, one of the underrated, overlooked reasons as to why Bama has struggled and not won a national title in the last couple of years, yeah, a lot of it's on the defense and Pete Golding, and we can talk about that. But a lot of it's just they've lost dudes out wide. They don't have those superstar game breakers out wide that change games, like, that were just impossible to defend. Like, Ohio State has those guys now every year. Georgia's had those guys at tight end. They don't have those guys anymore. They haven't had those game wreckers. It's what happened to Clemson, right? Like, Clemson hasn't had anybody on the outside that scared you like a Mike Williams in forever. The Hunter Renfrows, who were just really, really good and really, really hard to stop. Bama hasn't had that. And I mean, Jalen Burton's fine, but like, he wasn't someone who scared Georgia fans or scared SEC teams week over week. Isaiah Bond, whoever. I'm curious how that works, because everyone's talking about Jalen Milroe, Justice Haynes, but like, what is Kalen DeBoer going to do? Is he going to actually elevate some of these guys? Are we going to learn that it was actually more of Alabama's previous coaching staff wasn't getting the most out of some talented receivers? Or does Alabama run into real problems because the stuff that DeBoer wants to do at Alabama, he just doesn't have the receivers yet. Like, he has Ryan Williams coming in, but he's a true freshman. Like, I don't know. I'm very curious what the wide receiver situation looks like and how much Bama runs the ball and how much DeBoer evolves and kind of maybe leans on the run game more just because he doesn't have the dudes out wide. Like, Justice Haynes should be a big factor. Jay Miller should be a big factor. Jalen Milroe with his leg should be a big factor. But that's not what they were doing with Penix. Penix was a pocket quarterback. Like, that's not something we saw at UW the last few years. So I'm very, very curious how that all meshes. You know what I mean?
Without a doubt. I think, but at the end of the day, I think every coach's job is to get the best out of the talent he has. And if you're going to Alabama and you don't make running game a priority, like, you're not using the advantages that they have on their roster. They got some big old offensive linemen and they got some dynamic running backs. So, and then you have a running quarterback as well. So, like, you're going to have a dynamic running game. And then that's why you trust Kalen DeBoer to, maybe make it as easy as possible on Jalen Milroe with his scheme. But you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, they don't have the personnel out wide that Washington has. So you're gonna have to figure out a way to make it work.
I mean, Jeremy Bernard this will be school 3 for him. Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice. That's scaring anybody in the SEC right now? Is that scaring anyone?
I will say, who's it? Ryan Williams, the 5-star true freshman coming in. Like, who knows? That guy could be a game changer from day one.
But that's asking a lot of a true freshman. Like, I like Amari Jefferson out of
sure.
Tennessee here, Caleb Odom. Like, they have dudes coming in, but I mean, Caleb Cunningham, that was a big 5-star win for Alabama on the trail last week. Like, I'm not worried about the future and the talent that he's bringing in. I'm talking just strictly this year. Like, I just think the receivers that are going to play this year are not going to separate. And I think Bama is going to have a subpar receiving core this year. Like, that's just, unless you play a lot of freshmen, but I don't see that happening.
No, and it's hard to trust freshmen for sure. Ryan Williams, he reclassified though, so he is on this year's this year's team.
Super young though. I don't know. I would be surprised if he's a big factor right away here. We shall see. Mine though, I will say, Matt Green, Kane Womack, and I don't think it's Womack. We always thought it was Womack, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Womack. And obviously, South Carolina.
Hey, you steered me wrong on Aiden Childs, so I can't.
That's true.
I don't know. I can't trust you.
That's fair. But comes in from South Alabama. Successful there. I think that's a sneaky underrated one that I'm so curious, because you talked about Pete Golding over the last few years, and I think he's been good and been what Ole Miss needed. But I don't think I sent you that stat of the difference between the title teams with Bama with Pruitt and Kevin Steele versus what you saw, Kirby Smart, excuse me, to what it looked like with Pete Golding. Like, there was a huge drop off, and that was part of the reason that Alabama just has not. We talk about the reasons they haven't won a title in half a decade. That's some of, like, we're fine. Those are some of the little things that have kind of eroded and had eroded the last few.
They have one title in the last half decade.
Yeah, but I'm saying this is going in. That was in the 2020 season. Like, we're going into the 2025 season right here, Matt Green. Once the season wraps up,
we're in 2024.
Yeah, but I'm saying you're nearing half a decade. I'm saying nearing half a decade. Like, after this season, if they don't win, it's half a decade.
I'm eager for Alabama's demise as much as the next guy, but it's only been three seasons have been played since their last championship.
So I don't know. It feels like 7. Anyway,
but yeah, but they have one title in the last 6 years. Like, that's way different than the peak Saban dynasty for sure.
I mean, that's what we were saying about Clemson, right? Clemson fans were like, "Hey, we can't win it every year," and then you're like, "Okay, well, we're getting a little bit longer here. We're at year 5. We're at year 6." And then you're like, "Are you sure you're still like it? I think it's over." Like, at what point do you just go, "The run's over"? Like, this is just kind of who you are now. But I think Kane Womack is a really interesting hire, because if that's a home run for Kalen DeBoer, that's a game changer for them. Like, I think if he's the guy, because I mean, getting a sitting D1 head coach like Kane, I don't know. I'm very curious how that works at Alabama. So I know everyone's going to be looking at the offense. What if he gets that defense to back, not exactly what it was with Pruitt and Kirby Smart? I think that's asking too much. But what if he gets somewhere in the middle of those Kirby defenses and what we saw the last few years of Pete Golding? What if he's able to elevate them to that middle portion of what that is? Maybe they're not a number 1 overall defense, but what if he gets them to like top 10, top 8 or something. Like, I don't know. I think that's a sneaky important thing to watch this year is what kind of jump for me. So the main character for me is actually what the defense looks like. Does Alabama's defense start to look closer to what they looked like in the height of Saban's powers in Tuscaloosa?
We shall see, sir. What was Washington last year? The like 50 something ranked defense a year ago. So that wasn't Womack, but that was Kalen DeBoer's team.
Where was Kane Womack? I'm gonna pull this up right now. Scoring defense. Let's see here. South Alabama, 27th. Yeah, they were 27th in the country. Better than Clemson. Oklahoma here, different Matt
competition,
Green.
But for sure.
Oklahoma. The main character for you for the Oklahoma Sooners this upcoming season will be who? Matt Green.
I took the easy one on this one. It's got to be Jackson Arnold because that's just what this team is going to come down to. Obviously, this defense was improved a year ago, and they're definitely going to need to be more improved again. But I feel like I'm trusting Brent Venables. I was going back and looking at some of those Oklahoma defenses under Venables in the mid 2000s, and it was just, oh man, it was crazy seeing Oklahoma with a top 20 defense.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.